All right, so we've got Phil DeZutter joining us remotely tonight, so I'm just going to read our remote participation rules here real quick. Consistent with Massachusetts open law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, Regulation 940 CMR 29-10, which allows for remote participation in certain circumstances under the Massachusetts open law regulations. The Mendon-Upton Regional School Committee will be conducting this meeting with remote participation with one of our members, Phil DeZutter. Any and all votes will be conducted by roll call votes. Per usual, the meeting will be recorded and live streamed. All right, there we go. Phil, can you hear us? Oh. All right, we're going to keep going. Let's see. Can I have a motion to approve the 11/7/22 agenda?
To approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Oh, wait a minute. Can we do a roll call vote?
Matt Hagan, aye.
Vicky Ludwigson, aye. Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Eric Brown, aye.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Yeah. Now, we've got 5 votes. I think we're good to go. All right. Can we have a motion to approve the October 17th minutes?
I move that we approve minutes for last week's or 2 weeks ago's meeting, 10/17.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Matt Hagan, aye.
Vicky Ludwigson, aye. Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Eric Brown, aye.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Excellent. Okay. We've now got time on the agenda for school committee chairperson comments. I don't have any particular comments tonight, and if Phil does, we can get them afterwards. All right. Moving on, do we have any community comments tonight? Okay. Sam, I'll give you a minute. How are we doing with online? Do we have any?
So far, I see no hands raised, and we're working on getting Phil in here. My apologies.
Okay, no worries. All right, so I think we can continue moving on. No committee comments in the room or online tonight. All right, let's go ahead and move over to student comments. We've got some representatives tonight from the Misco High. Excuse me, Nipmuc. She's thinking Nipmuc High School students.
Awesome.
All right.
Jim, you got it.
Do you want to do the student reps first, or you want to do the school?
I think we'll just keep in the order. That works.
I don't know what the order is for that.
Yeah, I think we've got the Nipmuc folks.
Oh, okay, I see.
I'll give a quick intro as they're getting organized. So we're excited to have Mr. Gorman here with 3 of his engineering students who are doing some really incredible work. We've been talking a lot at Nipmuc about authenticity and learning experiences that really connect kind of what they're learning in the classroom to the world beyond their classroom. And as Mr. Gorman and his students were sharing this work, we couldn't think of a better example to bring forward to school committee and share with all of you, but to share with our community as well. So I'm going to let Mr. Gorman introduce the students and then let students probably do most of the talking. I'm sure Mr. Gorman has pieces to add to, but thank you for giving us this opportunity to share. Go ahead, Mr. Gorman.
Hello, thank you for having me back. I was here a couple weeks ago to get part of the project, which is happening this Friday. The rocket energy test in Brunswick, Maine is happening on schedule, thank goodness. And these are some of the students that have been working on it. So Sam, if you go to the next slide. This is Alex, Derek, and Roman. And the rest of the students that have been working on it are up here in the presentation. We worked on different aspects of it. And I think who's you guys doing the next one?
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. So our group was named runner-up in the International World Space Week competition. This was in relation to the UN Sustainability Goal number 7, which was to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. In this challenge, we learned about natural light, the energy from our sun, and designed and tested the concepts for solar energy, harvesting and use not only our community, but in a lunar habitat as well.
So we accomplished this goal by creating kits like these, which we use to collect data with temperature, light, and soil moisture. And we use this data to develop our idea, which one of the main parts of our idea consisted of using an electrical engine to power the solar panel that we want to collect the light with. Therefore, it is as affordable and clean as possible. And the second part of our idea would be rotating the solar panel along an axis that would be in perfect alignment with the sun. And we actually used this right here to make sure that this allows us to get every single angle, and we were able to record that and collect our data.
So we've been working on this with Max IQ Space and Blue Shift. Blue Shift is a company based in Brunswick, Maine, coming up with a zero or net carbon rocket fuel. You can actually eat it. If you go on Twitter, there's actually the CEO eating it on there. The program costs about $3,000 for us to get into it. But luckily, a former student from Nipmuc, Cody Harris, works for the company, or actually interning with the company, and he got us a sponsorship. So we didn't have to pay anything last year to join us, and it just continues on through this year until we actually do the rocket launch. Our spot's already booked, hopefully in the spring. So sometime in January, February, I'll be back here requesting to go for the real rocket launch, where their payload will actually go to space and come back and give them a lot of data on how the rocket's performing and how they can help Blue Shift actually make it a more efficient rocket. All set, Sam.
So, as Mr. Gorman mentioned, the goal that Blue Shift is trying to produce is a net zero CO2 emissions. And I'm just going to give you like the data behind that. If this goal is achieved and gets widespread implementation in the rocket industry, it could prevent around 1.5 billion kilograms of CO2 being released into the atmosphere over the next 50 years. To put that into perspective, you could drive 4.5 billion miles with that much burning that much CO2 in your car. That's around the distance from Earth to Neptune. And to put that in perspective, because planetary distances are kind of vague, it takes light around 4 hours to make that journey. And light moves pretty fast. While this isn't like a perfect solution to completely reducing the environmental impact of the rocket industry, it is a great step in the right direction for reducing that impact. And hopefully with Blue Shift making this change, other companies will follow.
And with this picture here, this is a mock-up of what the rocket will look like. And these are the spaces. One of those is where, one of these cubes here is where their device will fit into on the rocket launch. So, exciting.
Okay, so our first part of the project was to get familiar with the kits that we used and like how we'd collect data with it. So the second part is the suborbital launch that is happening this Friday. And during this launch, we're going to be collecting data with a vibrational payload, which will record things such as acceleration and temperature and many other things that will be on the kit, and also an environmental payload that records CO2 and particle emissions. Those will both be on the rocket that we are testing.
And this is Elise. She's worked a lot on the code. She started last year, at the end of last year, working on the code. So she's the one with the most experience at this. So at this point, she's the one doing this. The code is all open source. So these sensors are open source, so they plug together quite easily. And you just go to GitHub, you get the code, and they stitch the code together to do whatever functions they want. And it saves it either to an SD card or it has a little wireless antenna on it. It will transmit back and forth to their iPads or the school network and out from there. So kind of cool. It's not just a device they're building, but they're actually programming it as well to test their different hypotheses. And then this is the last one here. So the suborbital rocket launch will not happen in Maine like we thought. There's too much politics to deal with up there right now. They haven't, it's too big of a rocket. So they've announced it's either going to be at NASA Wallops Flight Center in off the coast of Virginia, or at Kennedy Space Center sometime in the spring. We'll get a 3-month notice for that. That's the standard when they announce it publicly. And since this is a suborbital launch, they usually go pretty much to schedule. There's not like the big NASA launches where they really have to wait for a window when they're trying to get the satellite in an exact spot. It's just meant to go up and come back down. So we can recover the payload. So hopefully in the future, several months, I'll be back asking for permission to take the students to either one of those locations to see their payload that they designed go up to space and to recover it. So, are there any questions I have?
So let me just reiterate this to make sure I understand. So you guys mentioned that you're trying to work out the propulsion method to make it more efficient for rocket launches. That's part of it, or is that part of what the company?
With them, yes, with Blue Shift. So one thing I forgot to emphasize in the slides, we found out last week. This is the only time high school students have ever worked with a rocket company to engineer their rocket. That's cool. So it's kind of a really unique project we happened into. That these kids have this amazing experience. A lot of the stuff is confidential, so they're only letting the kids do so much right behind the scenes, but they'll get the data.
And they can send the payload up.
And they can send the payload up.
And then what does the payload do specifically? What does the payload do?
So as a rocket goes up, it vibrates.
I see.
So they're trying to establish a vibrational profile. So how does that vibrate? So they'll have these different sensors. They'll be working with other groups from around the world, from Africa, Europe, to come up who's going to be in which orientation in there, who's going to have the video, all sorts of different stuff they have to work out in that final payload. So it's not just them doing it, it's actually an international cooperation of students working together to actually make the world a better place, which is kind of amazing to think about, that the students are actually able to do that.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Excellent.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
That's great.
Thank
Good luck.
Thanks.
Okay, go ahead and move on to our student representatives. Dean,
So I mentioned at the last meeting that DECA would be taking a field trip to Bentley for their leadership conference. And NIPA got to take 13 of our students from all grades to go to our Bentley University. We got to listen to an amazing young keynote speaker and attend 3 really insightful hour-long workshops with kids from all around our district. It was definitely my favorite field trip, and I was really lucky to attend. The VISTA program at Nipmuc is launching their buddy system. It is very excited about this, and it's where students volunteer to give some of their time, like breaks and lunches, to Nipmuc special education students, and that should be kicking off later this month. To move on to Nipmuc sports, Nipmuc varsity girls soccer team won their Central Mass Championship game over Auburn, advancing into the state's playoffs. And varsity cheer won their Central Mass Championship, earning first place this Sunday to compete for the state's title.
And then going back to DECA, we have a bake sale tomorrow for Election Day, and it goes from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. So if you guys are here at high school for elections, you can stop by and have some of our treats. And then we also have a Nipmuc book club. So Taft Library and the Nipmuc Media Center, they're coming together to create the Nipmuc book club. And they're having a fun discussion about their current read on Tuesday, November 15th at 2 o'clock. You can stop by the media center if you want.
So, great, thank you. All right, next up, I think we got superintendent administrator comments.
All right. Hi, everybody. It's always hard to follow our amazing students. All right, a few just basic updates I want to make sure everyone was aware of. We are referring to this week as the very unusual scheduled week. We have the half-day early release tomorrow for professional development. And then we have the next couple of days, we have our conferences as well. And we have Friday off for Veterans Day. So we'll probably want to come back and assess if we enjoy collectively having it all in one week as opposed to, you know, spreading it out over different times with the PD day in there. But I know this was something we were going to give it a try to kind of have it all in one week. At the end of last week, I know I shared some of this with you, but just wanted to mention that Phil and I attended the MASS-MASE joint conference. So that's the superintendent conference that is in combination with the school committee conference. For me, it's one of my favorite ones that I get to go to over the years. I find it's a nice mixture of sessions between school committee related governance type of topics, as well as broad topics that are impacting superintendents and school committees across the Commonwealth. I attended a range of sessions ranging from policy, basics of policy. I thought I should go back to that and check that out, see if I learned anything new. I went to an excellent one related to building systems of support for all learners on this science of reading. It was excellent. It was probably my favorite one. They had a leadership one for everyone relating to surviving and thriving in difficult times in education. Also, the focus of the conference was on equity. So a lot of the sessions were about leading, implementing equity with intentionality. Phil and I both attended together the hot topics and facilities and maintenance, and which was a follow-up to one that I went to at the superintendent's conference. So some things were the same, some things were different. And on Friday, I presented a session called Building an Equitable and Inclusive Culture in Your District with the superintendent from Douglas. It was well attended, well received, and I shared that with you just so you could see what the slides are. So if there's anything in there, you have questions at any point, feel free to reach out. But that was a good experience for us as well. We have our PD scheduled for tomorrow. Cheryl's done a great job along with the PD committee to set that up. It's building based or school based. And so we are continuing our focus on understanding, supporting, and engaging our students with inclusive Tier 1 practices. And so you'll see a range of activities, including I was over at MISCO today talking to Jen Mannion and Nick Cuomo about some of the work that they're going to be doing around data practices tomorrow, and was John Marianne may talk about it later, but we're telling me about some of the work they're going to be doing with departments as well. So it should be a good day. Because I can't get enough of talking about the district comprehensive accountability review, I thought I'd bring it forward as well. In your background notes, I just gave you the entire overview, again, just so you have all of it. But I thought it was important to bring it forward to this meeting since the review is taking place next week. And I wanted to publicly, again, say kind of a little bit of information about the schedule. And also we'll be sending out an email to families tomorrow. If it didn't go out, I don't think it went out at the end of today. It was either the end of today or tomorrow. So, but basically, the schedule, it's a combination of interviews and focus groups. And so we have set focus groups that are scheduled throughout all of the days. There is an open one. So this is one I want to make sure, and this just got scheduled. It'll be a virtual parent guardian focus group. It will be Monday, November 14th from 6 to 7. And basically in the email that's going to go out to everyone, anyone can sign up through that link and register and get the Zoom link that will take place on Monday. And they'll be in all of our classes. That's another piece, instructional observations in our classes between Monday through Wednesday as well. Our hope by going early in the year was that we would get feedback, particularly from the instructional observations that they'll be doing. They'll give us a little bit of an overview and feedback mid-year supposedly, and then we're hoping we'll get the actual report done before the end of the school year. It does take typically, I think, 5 months or so for them, because the report's like a 100-page report. But if we receive that, that would be really helpful for our strategic planning to make sure that we can incorporate, anything that they observed or came across, we might be able to incorporate. So that's our hope from this. So we count close to 100 or so documents that we are in the process of finalizing and uploading. We're pretty close to all of that, but it's been a lot of hard work. And I just have to really thank the leadership team for all of their hard work in putting all those documents together in a really short time. I don't know if you have any questions on that. No? Okay. All right, great. So those were my updates. So I was going to turn it over to Jay to give a couple. That's right. No, actually, you want to go show? The agenda says you. Yeah. I don't know. I'm going to hand it over to Cheryl.
All right.
Sorry, I didn't swap it in my background note.
Thanks for letting me present to you today. My first MCAS presentation with you all, and 2022. So let's get to this, shall we? It's been a couple years coming since the last report, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of this and being a part of this context. Is this up?
Oh, no. I don't know where it went. He needs to step out for a second. She was coming right back. I just messaged him to come back.
Is it possible to stream it from here, or will people not see it then?
If you can do it from here, but the people at home won't be able to see it unless he incorporates it into the Zoom. Okay.
There's always standing up in front of the camera with your.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Why don't we do
Okay.
Yeah,
Slides.
that sounds great.
All right,
That'll give us
that's what we'll do. You're it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a slide, so.
More tech presentation.
Sam probably thought he had time.
Yeah, right. All right, so there's two things I come to you tonight. One is we shared with you a folder now that all of the year-to-date reports will go in at the end of each month, so you can have access to them anytime you want. I will continue at the end of each month to put a new report in. I also put in there this quarter, a year-to-date, like a 5-year history of where we are on all the accounts as of like October 31st, so you can sort of see what our spending trends are. It's very irregular though, so I'm not sure that it gives you a ton of really valuable information, but it gives you some. Right now, we're on target. I have no issues with where we're going as far as expenditures. Some things haven't even been billed yet, like the out-of-district Norfolk Aggie stuff. They haven't sent us bills yet, so typically we would have gotten them by now. But is there any questions on those?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay. Second piece is the Operational Services Division, which is the organization in Mass, the government that sort of controls special education out-of-district tuition rates. So typically, a private school that wants to raise its tuition has to submit to them by October 1st, saying, we'd like to raise our tuition, here's the reason why, we're doing the program different, whatever their validation is. They typically notify this, but I don't always feel that I get those letters, but that really doesn't matter at this point. They also set an inflation factor rate that districts are allowed to go up by. This year, they have decided that inflation factor rate is 14%. So I decided the only way to really get a good idea of what we should be budgeting was I would email out to all of our schools that we currently have students in and say, hey, look, what do you think? Every one of them, with the exception of one collaborative school, said, 14%, that's what they say, that's what we're gonna do. So,
Of course.
yeah, of course. Now, this doesn't apply to public schools or collaborative schools. They're an exception to it. And I did get one school that got back to me and said, we would never do that. We're thinking more like 4 to 5%. I still think that's a lot, but since we don't generally get that ourselves. The bottom line is that if we budget 14%, which is what we're going to have to do at this point based on what we're currently paying, plus I've used, I think, like 7% or 6% for the public schools and the collaboratives, we're looking at about a $335,000 to $340,000 increase in out-of-district tuitions. So that's something we need to plan for as far as doing the budget for next year. Now, there are going to potentially be kids that will age out, other kids that will come in, so that's still a variable number. The positive piece to this, because we always like to have positive information, is today the Department of
It's one of my rules.
I'm supposed to start with the positive, but I like to finish on a high note so I can go out like George Costanza. The Department of Ed today released the circuit breaker initial payments for FY23. So as you know, we are a year ahead on that. So what we take in FY23 is going to be what we have to offset costs in FY24, and they are funding transportation in 23 at 75%. So we're going to get about 1.22 million, I believe, in circuit breaker, where this year we're getting about 800,000. So that's a fairly substantial increase that will help offset some of these tuition increases that are coming down the road. So I took that as a positive. I mean, Lori V, who is the Lori Villamere, who does the circuit breaker filing for the special ed department, always is really diligent on staying on top of that and resubmitting. We will apply for extraordinary relief every year. Even if we don't get it, we give it a shot. All of that work pays off when we find out that we're getting 1.2 million in circuit breaker reimbursement. So that should help offset some of this, because we really won't have the answer to these tuition rates until long after town meeting. So we're going to have to budget at the high end to protect ourselves and see where it takes us.
And I think I shared it at some point when this information was coming out, what the rates typically are. So they've typically been 2%, 1.5%, 2%, 2.1. I had there was a whole list of what they have been, and then suddenly we're moving to 14. So the impact it's impacting everyone in the Commonwealth. So there are a lot of superintendents who are advocating to legislators within this week to see if we can have any impact. So there's a sample letter that I can send out, but we wanted to bring it forward to you just to give you a sense that this is definitely a concern for our budgets.
The estimated rate of inflation for fiscal year 2023 is 2.some%.
Right, and that's if you go back, it's about 2% year after year.
So, and honestly, I don't know where they got the 14% from, because that sheet doesn't even show how they came up with it. The previous year's sheet was 100.2% of the budget, which made sense after they totaled up. You're looking at that stuff. I can't total up 14%. It looks like
they're probably if I guess, they're projecting out based on the inflation going up and costs of all the energy costs, all the things that are really going up dramatically this current year. That's one of the things that's impacted us. We're lucky that we are locked in for our electricity supply at 9.6 cents a kilowatt, as opposed to National Grid that just went to 33 cents a kilowatt starting this week or last week. So that, we've done some good things as far as protecting ourselves. I did lock in heating oil at $3.29, I think, a gallon. It's now around $5 a gallon. So all that helps, but $1, $3.23 or $3.29 a gallon is still a lot more than the $1.67 we paid 2 years ago.
I actually misspoke. In the fiscal year 2024, they have their total for all the components adjusted was 105.18%. So they're only measuring 5% increase in inflation, but they're adding in something called a workforce stability factor of 8.82%, and then they're
that's one thing that
rounding it out to 14%.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I forgot to mention it. So some of the organizations are doing sign-on bonuses to get staff of like $10,000, something that public schools can't do, but they are
Really?
able to do. Yep, that was part of the FAQs that we received, yeah, yeah. So I think that must be what's working into that percentage.
No trade clauses, we can't do that either.
So with the increase in cost, looking at this number, can we assume that we're doing some cost benefit analysis as to maybe adding additional staff or programming to bring some of these students back to offset some of these increasing costs?
We do that on a regular basis, but I would tell you that the 24 kids that we currently have out are, most of those, the services are way beyond what we can provide without bringing in multiple staff. There's a reason they get placed out, and it's because the cost actually is probably cheaper than hiring 4 staff to cover the person.
Right before we start talking about a 14% increase.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So now again, we'll give you another.
It's definitely when we're speaking with, Jen D'Angelo and other at the buildings to see if there are specific needs of students that are arising, and if we don't have, and it's something that we think that we could put in, just like with the return to school, service, that's something that we brought forward as a proposal. So it's something we'll look at and see if it makes sense budgetarily and for our students, of course, and then we'll bring it forward in the budget.
Anything else? Okay, I will tag off to Cheryl.
All right, give it another shot. Thanks, Jen.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hard to give my intro, Sam. We waited for you last time, so no worries.
I'm here now.
Awesome.
So it's good.
That's right.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. All right, so let me frame a little bit about how I'd like to kind of do this presentation. I'm aware that this is of interest to a lot of people, and that if I get too technical or start to drone on, then I get glazed looks. So I'm going to try to keep your attention. Maybe we'll have a stretch break in the middle, something like that. But anyways, I'm going to lay it out like this. I'm going to first describe the landscape a little, and I know some of you are going to be like, come on, Cheryl, get on with it, just get to the good stuff. But the landscape is actually really important in understanding the data this year, so I'll keep it brief, but I'll give it a shot. I'll share the overall trends that were noticed in the MCAS throughout the state, and I'll also share our own district's trends. The teaser or thesis of the presentation is in aggregate, our district really mirrors the state trends, and so they hold true for us as well as many other communities in the state. We'll look at the MURSD results in light of the trends. I'll try to point out some of the places where there are little differences between our performance and growth and trends when you get down into when you start to disaggregate the data. And then throughout this and through the end, I'm going to highlight some of the things we're doing to explain some of what we're seeing, and also to address some of the things that we'll need to address. All right. Thanks, Sam. So here's the context. So we all know we're in this place where, we've been through a pandemic, and that pandemic has had a tremendous impact on all of us and our kids. And the kids are coming to school, and they're coming with stresses that they didn't have before, and they're coming dysregulated in some cases. And a big part of our jobs has been attending to them as whole people. You've heard the term the whole child. And that's really what this means, is that when we're educators and we're endeavoring to help them learn and grow, we need to be able to attend to how they can kind of engage with the academics. And so you'll see the diagram over here, that's the MTSS it's a pyramid, or in this case, it's a schoolhouse, and it describes the multi-tiered systems of support. And you'll see that social emotional is right at the base of that that diagram. And it's important because it is tremendously connected to the academics and the behavioral aspects of our children and how they engage with the work that we're in. And it's really amazing that this district focuses on that. And Carrie, you asked a question at the last meeting about this, and with without taking away from a different presentation, I'll share with you some of the things that kind of went through my head is, when we started school this year, there's a tremendous focus on this from the get-go. The kids are engaged in building community, they're engaged in socializing with each other, which is something that was drastically missing in the last couple of years. And, my own children are still, wrestling with that kind of lack of socialization for a couple of years. And this district also does a great job with building tools to help measure where we are social emotionally with our kids. So we use Panorama as a guide. That's the picture down in the bottom left. And we also use Thrively, and we have a system through our student information system called AMOS, where we can bring this data together and even bring it together in dashboards like some of the visuals that I'll show you through the presentation. So this is our context, and we need to understand that the MCAS results, are impacted by this context. If you could flip it soon. They're also impacted by this attendance piece. So a lot of us have been sick more than usual, and our kids are no exception. If you look at the data between 2019-20 to 2021, you can see almost a threefold almost increase in the number of percentage of students who are out for 2 weeks. Okay, and the chronically absent rate, which is more in the number of 3.5 weeks of absence from school, is up to 20% of our kids last year. And that's just student absences. So that doesn't account for the fact that their teachers sometimes are getting sick too. And so there's this piece of all this context where we're working to help kids learn and grow, and the time that we have with them is limited or reduced in this case because of this context. One important thing that I just stuck as a note at the bottom is that these are statistics on the aggregate, but when you dive down into things like low income and high needs students, their absence rates are proportionately even higher. And that becomes of note and of something for us to look at, because we want to make sure that achievement gaps aren't increasing through the course of this. And so here's the testing landscape. Obviously, testing was disrupted because of the pandemic as well. So we had a couple of years, 2018 and 19, where it was full test administration, and all of the metrics were being collected, and they were so after the test had been switched. So it was a kind of a couple of steady years there. And then there was no MCAS in 2020. And some of the metrics are based on metrics from the year before. So that's a factor too. So 2021, we had half test administration where kids grades 3 through 8 took half of the test administration, and grade 10 took a full. And because there was no test in 2020, there was also no real growth metric. They did an alternate growth metric, but it wasn't the same metric as the one that we see in 2022. So we're back to full test administration, which is the data I'm going to report to you on. But I think that it's really important, a couple things to bear in mind. The statistics can't really be compared from year to year because of the disruptions in the test. And I know we want to try to do that because we want to try, always go back in time. And even some of my displays that I'll show you will go back to 2018 and stuff like that. But really, we want to see this year as a baseline for the metrics, in the sense that we're back to hopefully normal, in the sense that we'll have the administration again, and we'll be able to continue building a growth model, which is really built out of 3 years of consecutive data. This year's growth scores just have 1. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I'm in a school.
I'm not droning on though. Seriously, you're attending. Sean, how can I help you?
I'm wondering what was the year when the MCAS changed its format?
Two. To the next
for lack
gen.
of a better, to the next gen.
I believe
For
it
lack
was
of a better term.
2017 administration.
All right, great, thank you.
I'll check that for sure, but I think it was 2017.
Okay, or it went into effect in 2018, and the tests in 2018, or was it?
I think it was in effect in 2017. I think it was like those 3 years that were, that's why I was describing it as staple.
Okay.
Okay. So back to this. I think one of the points that I just want to make sure that I'm highlighting is that when you think about this, and it might not come to your mind, but like our 5th graders actually, they had never taken a full MCAS administration before, right? So just last year, for the very first time, they're doing the full MCAS after going through a pandemic and not being with their friends and being in a new school and all of that stuff too. So there's lots of transition and disruption there. 6th graders had had the full administration, but only once before in their 3rd grade year. And the students who took it as 10th graders, they had taken the last time they took the full administration of the test was the 7th graders. So there's our testing context. So here's some of the state level trends. And as I said before, our data very much aligns with the state level trends. So I'll describe them briefly and then I'll show them through our data. So the state level trends are that math scores increased actually. It's really encouraging and the data will show this out. And that's pretty much across the board. So the state was basically showing, and what you'll see in some of the displays are a check mark-like view of the line graphs. English language arts, ELA, the scores continued to decline. So that was a big focus for the state in terms of their presentation. There's lots of speculation about why that is, the way that kids learn literacy and what they need to do to be able to write in particularly during the pandemic. There's a lot of speculation about how that practice kind of continued. The writing scores and the early literacy challenges were of note for the state trends, and they are for us too, to a certain extent. And then with respect to this, I've already kind of highlighted, but with respect to the results, they're kind of like asking us to think about this as a tentative baseline, in the sense that with scores improving 1 year in math and continuing to decline in ELA across the state, they're not really sure what will happen next year. You know, everyone hopes, obviously, that the more we feel back to normal, the more we'll start to see things return and trend up. But because we haven't, especially in ELA, seen it start to trend up, there's this question mark about what's going on. And that's what we're thinking about too. So we'll keep going. So I'm going to highlight each portion of the MCAS one at a time. I'll do math first, ELA, then science. And I'm going to start with some similar charts, and I'll spend a little bit more time with this one just to make sure you understand what you're looking at, and then we'll kind of flip through them. So this chart right here explains proficiency in a number of different ways. First, it gives you a percentage of proficiency across the district. Again, this is in aggregate. And next to it is a comparison to the previous year, which shows that our proficiency went up by 8%. Next to that is our comparison to the state, which means we're 4 percentage points above the state percentage proficiency. Under that is the growth percentile in aggregate. And I'm going to focus on the growth a bunch, and I don't know if that's the way we usually do things here, but I love this statistic, and it's going to get better over time. And it measures a lot of what I think is really important to this district in terms of helping children thrive. And so what it means is essentially that in aggregate, students in our district performed better than 50%, more than 50% of their like scoring peers, okay? Then over here, I'll explain the bar graphs. This is more like a distribution of the proficiency percentiles, and I like the display because it kind of shows the differences in like the buckets of areas of the test. But I'm not going to focus too much on that display, except for calling out in this one instance that what's really interesting to me is that
there are far and away this band of partially meeting expectations. That's essentially where our tier 1 focus needs to be. It needs to be on what all kids receive in the classroom, in a tier 1 supported classroom. And so it's not where the kids aren't meeting expectations, where they might need more interventions, and those percentiles still remain low. So I won't say much more about those displays, but it's there for you. And then the line graph, I think this is where the kind of thesis comes in. It shows that in MURSD, over time, especially right here where we've gone through the pandemic, our in aggregate trends really mirror the state. And in aggregate, they're not really like differentiating from that state line. It's very close. So we'll keep going.
How do they measure the like scoring peers? Is that based on, what factors is that based
on? So it's pretty complex. It's a cool statistic, but I'll try to give it the brief. Okay. What they do is they essentially over time, they like have this group of peers that score like a child. Okay. So if a child is scoring at a 500 or something like that, they'll grab the kids around there, and then they'll do a display where they'll track all those kids and they'll array them, and they'll figure out where they arrive here. Then they'll do it again, and then they'll do it again. And they have a way of crunching that data over 3 years, so that essentially you get this kind of score that means based on these 3 years of data, you can kind of see where the kid was in relation to their like academic peers. Okay. Yeah. Now you're glazing over though. So.
Can you repeat the statistic that you cited that?
Yeah, it's student growth percentile.
Yeah. What was the number with it though?
Oh, it was 50.2. That's the 50.2 on the display. And we'll do other growth statistics here too.
So if I were to imagine that within a grade, say the 10th graders or the 8th graders take the MCAS, there's going to be some young people in that grade that might not have as much experience or development. There's going to be some older people in that grade. They'll each have different trajectories, and they're measuring those different groups based on what they achieved the prior year.
But it's not based on age. So age isn't a factor, right? It's based on their scores. Okay. So they're basically saying this group of like scoring students, and they're saying, and they're creating the statistic as a way of providing some comparison about how kids are growing compared to their this like group of peers.
Okay, thank you.
And one piece with the range that we've talked about in the past is you want to see the growth within 40 and 60 is that's average growth. So anything below is low growth, anything above 60 is high growth. So if you're in that band too, that's something that we've looked at in the past. So you'll see later, not to give it all away, but some areas we have some really great growth happening too, which is really powerful to see.
Yep.
And other areas that we're going to need to keep working on.
Yep. And the other thing I'll just say too, because like anything over 50 is really good, right? Because you're outperforming more than half of your like peers. And even if it was just slow growth, if you maintained that, you would see the growth kind of take place over time, the differences. So anyways, that's how I think about it, is I'm looking for over 50.
And is that an average across all groups represented inside the school?
That's a good question. So there's debate. I don't know actually if the state has turned to an average, because the statistic itself is a mean. And so people who know statistics don't like to mix means and averages, right? So I mean medians and means. So they talked about going to an average, but I'm not sure if this one is generated with an average or if it's still based on a median. So should I keep going?
Yes.
All right. So here we're now disaggregating the data, and mostly by grade. And the display here, I used a version of this with the ELA, so I'll make sure to kind of share a little bit. What you're looking at is proficiency percentiles, basically the percent of students who met or exceeded proficiency in 2019, 21, and 22. And then that those percentages have been calculated to find out what the difference is from 19 to 21, and then from 21 to 22. And here's where you can see that what I've kind of squared is like, this is why they're like, oh, we're in math recovery, right? Because you can see that the first administration showed that there were still declines, significant declines in math. But this last administration shows that in most cases, and this is our data, not the state aggregate data, right? In most cases, our students the trend is reversing. We actually are seeing increases in proficiency rate. And the areas of growth that I highlighted, the student growth in 2022, you can see a couple of them are over 60. And in 8th grade, we've got 54, which I think is healthy as well. So I'm gonna now show you a couple of displays that kind of make some of these bright spots pop a little bit. This is math recovery in elementary. In aggregate across elementary school in grade 4, the growth is 62 percentile, and that's amazing. Actually, that's really, really healthy growth. I think it shows it really well in the line graph display where it shows that the state average is the bottom dashed line, and the two different color blue lines are our elementary schools. And you can see in that last administration that it shoots right up. Now, I don't think that's an accident. Okay, I think there's a lot of stuff that's going on that really begets these scores. And the student success in this level, we adopted a new curriculum, Bridges, which is high quality instructional material as per DESE. We spent some time rolling it out last year. We have new systems in the form of iReady, providing not only assessments that help guide our instruction, but also personalized instruction for students that need it. And we have ST Math that was really, really well adopted at the elementary level. It provides practice and helps kids think differently about the concepts. And they really did an outstanding job with all of those supports. So I think that this is one of these places where I'd just like to highlight that some of what we're already doing explains some of the things that we're seeing.
So just, I'm sorry, one more question.
Yep.
On the previous slide that you had, so if I were to track like grade 3, 2019, I would see the same cohort of students in grade 4 in 2021, correct?
That's, no, they'd actually be in grade 5 in 2021, right? Because they skipped a year, there's no 2020.
Yeah, that's just my own math
Yep,
from
that's all
2019,
right.
2021. But in other words, that shows their progress through. So can we draw a pattern on grade 6 that's obviously not showing as much growth?
Yeah, are you basically saying, is it a good thing to do to kind of draw a diagonal line from the 3rd grade to the 5th grade to the 6th grade?
Exactly, is that a good thing to do?
It's not.
Okay.
And it's not because we're looking back, it's kind of how I started this. We're looking back at different contexts and a different test administration. And so it's really hard to compare different times, like when kids were only having half the test and things like that. We will get to a place where we'll be able to kind of like look at cohorts again and track them over time, but I don't think that's the best way to think about the data right now.
Okay, good. And then a second question for the next slide, Sam. So this is all based on grade 4. So the left graph is.
That's right, and it's only grade 4 because you need a year before to do the growth.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Calculate the growth.
So I'm probably missing it, but if I flip back and forth between slide 7 and 9, I think the dotted line is the same because that's the state number on both slide 7 and 9.
That's right.
So
why are they different?
No, so I'm okay with that. I guess what I'm saying is if we're showing the 2 elementary schools are significantly above the state number, and then our district number is slightly above the state number, that tells us our middle school and high schools are below the state average.
Well, and if we look at the proficiency Which direction do you go, Sam? Back one, yep. This is gonna tell that story too. You see I was doing the highlights first, right? Because we do good news, okay?
Well, the data popped out.
That's right. But the 33 and the 38, and some of those are there too, and we're gonna get to that in just a minute. Okay?
Okay.
All right. And so this is Nipmuc. So you asked about the high school, and we're this is an interesting display. Like I don't like using the MCAS to compare to different districts, but I know we all do. And there's this place in and by the way, this is a group that has this dashboard that's providing it for free across the Commonwealth, and we're using it this year. And so we're using it because it actually provides some of these displays that are really interesting to look at. So this is Blackstone Valley, and we're kind of middle of the pack for proficiency in Blackstone Valley. But even saying that, you see we're like on the top of there's not a huge difference in terms of where folks are in terms of the average scaled score, which is the left-hand axis in this particular graphic. But notice that we're the furthest one over because the horizontal axis is growth. And so we're top in growth at Nipmuc for math.
That's great.
Yep. All right. So now we're going to get to some of what you were asking about. Okay. So I think it's important to kind of look carefully at the places where we need growth and where there are areas for growth. And it's clear that in this area in 5th and 6th grade, we experienced low growth and not as much recovery in math. And so the question is, well, why? And obviously we kind of highlighted that at the beginning of the presentation, like 5th and 6th graders have had a really unique experience, okay? But that doesn't explain everything, because when you think about growth based on the explanation, it's kind of in relation to like scoring peers. And so that really should make us kind of ask questions about why, what's going on here. And there's lots of different explanations possible, and that's what we're working on together right now. So let's see, all right, yep, the next slide gives you a sense of some of what we're doing. So first of all, there are questions like at the middle school level in terms of the 5th to 6th grade transition about curriculum, right? Like that could be a question to explore. We have a 5th grade curriculum that is very well adapted to the elementary school where they don't switch classes and stuff. So we've been working with the 5th grade math teachers to try to figure out how to build that curriculum into the 5th grade model. And, we continue to do that with the 5th grade. And then they switched to a different curriculum, 6th through 8th grade, which we're working on with actually some new staff members. We have 2 new staff members in 6th grade that we're working on kind of looking into that. So that's one possibility right there. There's another possibility here is really getting into the details of what belies where we're at in terms of the standards. And so one thing I wanted to show you is that we do a data analysis. Basically, we break the standards down and we look at each of the standards to see, well, where are the places on the MCAS that are the places where our students aren't doing as well. So we can use the data to do this. And that's the display that's shown right under grade 5. It kind of gives you like a little kind of splash of like, okay, well, there are in these 3 standards that we're looking at, essentially trying to figure out how our kids can grow better there. And then we're looking at the display over here to the right, where it breaks it down even further. And so one example would be, we look at measurement and data, and we go to the measurement and data section in the display to the right, we can see that there are some parts of the MCAS that are focused on geometric measurement, understand concepts of volume and relate volume to multiplication and addition. And in that area, the results for our students were below the state average, and there were a number of points on the assessment that were given for that concept. Now, how delighted was I to see the presentation at the last school committee meeting where they're literally taking a project-based learning project that has everything to do with finding the area and figuring out what they need for wood chips in the preschool. So like when I see that, I'm like, we're doing the right things to kind of get at some of this learning. And so those are the things that I kind of wanted to highlight here. Also, this little wheel down here, which you'll probably see more of, you'll see this in many forms. It represents inquiry in my mind, this idea of kind of looking at the data the way I'm kind of walking you through here, asking what's going on, why, and then coming up with a plan once you think you have a kernel of an idea that you can then test and assess with formative assessments. So we'll talk about how we come up with formative assessments that matter and that we can use in real time, because we have things like the iReady, but we're not going to administer the iReady so often that our kids would, not like us after a while. So we need to do smaller data dips so that we can get a sense of how they're progressing between administrations of those assessments. Keep going. We ready to turn our attention to ELA? How's my pace?
Yeah, good.
Okay. All right. All right. So here's our ELA data. Again, it is, I'm going right to the line graph now, which is like the punchline, right? Our trends in aggregate mirror the state, okay? We have seen, compared to last year in this district, unfortunately, a continued decrease, and so have most other places. But we want to pay attention to that because we want that trend to turn around. We see our growth is typical, okay? And compared to the state, we're still 6 percentage points above the state. So flip to the next one. This display is a little bit different than the one that I showed you, but the kind of idea is similar. What I really wanted to highlight in this one, because this is where the story lies, is I wanted to highlight this 2019 to 2022 change, which you can see is pretty significant in terms of its drop. And that's a component of 2 years of decreases for ELA. Again, 2 years of decreases that almost everyone has experienced. And we're looking at that carefully because we want that trend to reverse. But part of our context is that it has not yet. Just the same, there are some areas of, there are some bright spots in this. And we see growth percentiles at 53 and 63 for 7th and 10th grade respectively. You want to keep going, Sam? All right, so here's one display that I think is interesting. This is 7th grade where we're above the state's proficiency. And the one that I really like is the right-hand display, which kind of maps out growth over time. And you can't really do this. So, because you can't really compare from year to year, but here I'm not trying to compare them. I'm just looking at them in relation to the state. So the thing that I like about this is it shows that our growth over the course of each of the administrations since 2018 in this grade has been higher than the state average, okay? And that I think is cool because that means that over time you'd see things getting better and better in terms of proficiency and the differences.
So,
Yep.
I ask it, I'm sorry, go ahead.
How is the state average in SGP anything other than 50%?
Yeah, that is a good question. That is a good question. And so there would be that 1 year where it's not. I do not know. It should be a straight line. You're right, Matt.
So my question is more about the this changes from 2019 to 2022. No, I take that back. I don't have a question.
Okay. All right, now I'm all curious. But I do want to go on to this next display. All right, so then this next display is a scatter plot, and I think I pulled this up because this is Nipmuc's. This is a way to highlight what's happened at the 10th grade for the last administration. And first of all, the growth distribution, you can see that like there's this growth that's towards the high side, even some students in the 80th percentile and beyond for growth. But the thing that I really liked about this display when you dig down is you can see that the growth is not just for certain groups of students. When you see a scatter plot where the like angle is closer to horizontal, it's showing you that the growth is universal. And, you know, yeah, ideally we'd want it to be like elevated as much as possible. But what I really like about this is it shows equitable growth across the scatter plot. So some students who aren't doing as well on the exam are growing really, really well on the exam. Same with the students that are doing very well on the exam. Some of them are growing at the top percentile. So I like this display, and I think it talks about equity in that regard.
So it's your bottom left quartile that you're concerned about, or you'd want to make sure you're following up on. Is that?
Well, I mean, yes, absolutely, because those are lower growth and lower scoring, absolutely. Right. And the point of this, like I want to get up and go there, but the point of this is that you see the gray all the way across, right? And you see the blue all the way across. Sometimes when you look at these scatter plots, the blue is all mostly in the upper right quartile and the gray is mostly in the lower left quartile, and that wouldn't show equity.
Got it. Makes sense.
Right. So now, yep.
Sorry.
No worries. It's the same one. So you must have been like, did I go backwards? So the only difference here is actually what I'm doing is I'm calling out the lower growth in this display, right? So it's still that we're experiencing declines, but calling out the lower growth. And what I wanted to do with this is just kind of give you a taste of some of how we're thinking about looking at the data. Maureen already talked to you about some of the PD that's happening, like at the middle school and the elementary schools. And if you flip to the next slide. So we're looking into the data through standards-based analyses. And at the elementary school, for example, one of the things that's happening tomorrow is we're going to work with educators to kind of look into specifically, they're going to focus on some of the writing standards tomorrow. And what they're going to do is they're going to kind of look at them and try to see if they can identify proficiency through samples of work, right? So that they can calibrate what their expectations are through the standards. What I did here is display a vertical kind of aligned standards so that you can see that one of the things that we think about is like, well, how do these skills develop from one grade to the next grade to the next grade? Because we do these analyses in grade level teams, but the reality is a child is developing in different trajectories, right, over the course of time. And so we're trying to figure out how their whole experience can contribute to the skills that they ultimately achieve. So what this shows is what the other table shows just in a visual, right? It shows that when you dive down into the standards, you see that some of where we're falling off in the 5th and 6th grade and ELA is in this language and writing standard, okay? And you can see where we are in comparison to the state average based on the little black line, and so we start to dip below the state average in some of these. So we really want to look in terms of what's happening and how we're doing in these standards. And that's one of the reasons why we're kind of like focusing some of this, our attention on the writing. You can also see that, and it's interesting, when you dive even further, and I didn't do this in 4th grade, you can do an item analysis in the 4th grade. And when you do the item analysis in the 4th grade, one of the things you'll see is that actually it's often the reading questions, some of the reading standards-based questions, the actual questions that we fall below. In aggregate, you look at the reading and it's on par with the state, but when you dive into it, you start to see that. And that's already been noticed at our elementary schools, and they're already talking about how can we think about reading and what can we do to build our reading instruction, and what can we do to help our community practice these skills so that we're doing this together and we're helping to develop these skills together. In any event, I'll go back to the vertical stuff. This kind of strategy allows us then in a session like what's happening in the middle school tomorrow to kind of get together as a department and really kind of calibrate. What are we doing in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade when we're talking about developing these skills? And do we see proficiency, kind of the rigor of that building? And so we're fortunate to be able to have a lot of these half-day PDs where we're all together and we can kind of get together with to do some of that vertical teaming. So is it okay to move on to science?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, this chart 18, I think, it's a really good chart.
Okay, good.
I mean,
Good.
That really pops out.
I can't tell you how fun this is. I'm not just being an idiot here, but it's been so long since we've seen any data whatsoever. It's been,
You're
No, but
drinking it in because
yeah.
it's been so
this is
long.
not boring at all. This is like the first time we've seen stuff like this, and I don't know if did we ever see the details when we were with y'all? I don't remember seeing it to this level
No,
of
and
detail.
that's, I mean, the advantage too of like the open, what's it called, open architects, going in there. And I found the other day, this weekend, I'm like, look at this chart. And I brought it to Jen. I'm like, did you see this visual display? I mean, so when you go into it, you can find out some great stuff. So
I mean, we've been looking for
knowing
this
that
for
you wanted
years, so
different
this is
ways to look
really
at
fun.
it. Good. Yeah, I'm glad you like it. Good.
All right, so, and I'm gonna kind of bring us to a close here. Our science story is strong, right? And we're 11% above the state average in science. You can see that our proficiency has stayed pretty steady in terms of the distribution, and we're at 53% proficient. And we just saw some of why that is true. This is my last slide that I wanted to make sure that I stuck in here because I think about this a lot. A lot of the pandemic has really, one of the things that's resonated in the pandemic is this idea of gaps increasing, health gaps and economic gaps, and academic gaps is no different. I feel like it's hard to tell, right? Like you would never just like look at the graphs and know where we are right now. But there is some evidence in the data that in this district, this is ours, this is not a state trend, okay? But in this district that the achievement gaps are kind of staying stable a little bit. And I think that's good. That's not great, like we want achievement gaps to shrink. But in this context, if they're not exploding, I think that's good. So I just wanted to call that out. So here's some of our next steps, which we've, and initiatives that we've already started talking about and I've woven through. So I won't spend a ton of time on this. I'd really like to spend a little bit more on the last one. But we're talking about curriculum alignment, where we've done some of this work in elementary math, and we'll continue to support it. We're looking to do more in middle school math in terms of implementation and the vertical alignment. We're looking at our literacy curriculum. We've adopted foundations last year, so that was before we saw some of the scores. And clearly, MCAS doesn't test the K through second graders, but there is an observation made at the elementary level that one of the things that they're missing is their phonics. And so this program was brought in to kind of supplement our curriculum. And folks at the elementary level have been really thoughtful in training each other, first of all, in this. That started happening last year, and also in weaving the curricula together. So they've been really thoughtful in working to show how you can use this one and this one together, and you don't have to necessarily follow a map, right? And they can be woven together to build the skills. So that's been great. We're working on PD. We're doing PD that focuses on inclusive practices so that we can keep our attention on all students. And also we're focusing on specific practices that will get better outcomes in some of the areas that we just noticed, including we're talking about guided reading, looking at some writing strategies, and I highlighted project-based learning, which I think is, you know, those types of experiences, if they're attached, if they're standards-based, and they're really the standards are thoughtfully woven into them, they are skills that kids will really learn from and apply. So we're looking at data literacy and inquiry. We're starting to think about and implement, and at the very nascent stages, right, but like regular inquiry cycles where we're going through and asking for formative assessments and how are you going to check each other. And one of the things I love about this district is that the teams are so strong, and that's to our advantage. And folks are really looking to collaborate with each other. And if we can keep that connection and use it, they'll really help each other to kind of like, you know, help each other grow their practice and, you know, keep their eye on those assessments because they have team meetings all the time and they'll talk about it. So that's the hope there. And then, of course, we're thinking about parental engagement because that's part of the whole child. It's the whole family. And there's so many areas here where, you know, engaging with families will support everything that we're doing in schools. So one of the areas, and we've talked about this a little, has been in communicating. I put an analysis of need. And what that means is that we're able to share the data with families, right? But not just like a data point, like, you know, that's not going to tell the picture, but how we kind of bring together the formative assessments that happen in the class, the assessments that we use in terms of iReady for benchmarking and stuff like that, and the MCATs into a full picture, and looking for ways to partner with families. So the last slide, though, and this is like how to bring this home, Cheryl. This is like a slide where I'm calling out all of the things that aren't measured in what I just spent the last whatever, you know, and that we really need to be thoughtful about. And I hope that's part of our work as we can continue, because this district is really special in the way that it creates and embodies this, like it really embraces this portrait of a learner for kids, these strengths-based ways of looking at what students are accomplishing and their achievements, which is so much different than the presentation I just gave you, right? Where it's all about, in some ways, who's not making the cut and what are you doing there? And so I think it's important in this last breath of this presentation to call that out, right? We need to do more strength-based, kind of thoughtful approaches to measurement and to kind of having us be accountable for the things that really matter to us. They're artists, they're working with their kids across the community, they're mentoring each other and providing like mentors in the sense of like, there's a picture of Girls Who Code. There are kids there who started a whole new honors society at the high school. Like, these are real life skills and things we should be proud of, and we've got to figure out how to hold that up too.
So if you were to measure our progress in one of those areas that we're not measuring today, how would you do that?
Well, let me take my ball out here, Sean. No. I love the question, and I think really it's hard, right? But I think part of the answer is not in the ways that I just described. They're not numbers, right? They're in things that we can hold up, and there could be numbers associated with them, like how many students have participated in the I'm forgetting the word, but
Mastery transcript.
No, not the mastery transcript. The thing that the kids are doing that have to have their
Learner
page.
Scholars Profile.
The learner scholars profile. Okay, like those are powerful experiences if they can bring that to bear. How many kids are, doing this? There's a picture of the art show there, right? Like, and to have conversations with these kids about how they've developed their whole portfolio. I sat in on a workshop with you guys where we were talking about showcases, right? Showcases of our learning. That's a way of kind of looking at and not measuring in the way that MCAS measures, but thinking about and really holding up some of these things. And when I was kind of being funny a second ago, these aren't easy. Like, I'm not going to be able to just sit here at the table and say, this is what you should do, right? These are conversations we need to have together to kind of build out what this community thinks is really powerful to be able to hold up, and what we're ready to start a new strategic plan. So what better time than now, right?
So as you develop the practice of understanding how you measure that, you'd have to go through a cycle to try to improve it, come back with feedback as you go forward.
Sure.
That type of thing. Understood.
And I think what she just said about authentic showcases, great example. So we never came forward and said, this is how we're going to measure it, right? And maybe we should have done that with a strategic plan. So we're going to measure it through these showcases. But that's a prime example, because if we go through and we track back from our work about authentic audiences and the work that we've done as a goal, as a district, a strategic goal, showcases is just part of what we do now. So it's like, when's the next showcase here? They're learning, or, symposium. Now we're going to add this group in. But we didn't have that a number of years ago. So maybe in the beginning, of that plan, we could have said, authentic audiences and showcases are one approach for measurement, and hear from students about what they've learned by going through that process. But that's a great example of many of what I think we try to bring forward at school committee and other highlights that we do. But maybe with the next plan, we have to think about what those outcomes of measurement and try to tie it a little bit more closely so it becomes clearer to people, because it's happening, right? Those are outcomes for our students that they didn't have 5 years ago when we've added in these experiences.
The thing that I would fear is that, especially for something like Portrait of a Learner, you've got so many areas and so many things that you're trying to do. Trying to measure every single one becomes really difficult.
Yeah, and don't forget the
focus
slippery
on one.
slope, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want it to become something where kids feel like they're ever not a solution seeker, right? That's the strength of this model, is it's a strength-based model. So you've got to be really thoughtful in how you kind of raise these things up. Look, the MCAS is good. It's part of our fabric. It tells us kind of like some of the base skills that we want to be able to keep our eye on, and so we're here. And all I am kind of ending on is, wouldn't it be nice if, and we could hold up some of these other things that are really meaningful, when you've got students that are creating ideas about how to better curriculum in the district. I've been through presentations, or how to, send rockets up that don't add to our carbon footprint. These are experiences that are really meaningful for kids, and they learn a lot from them. And in ways that the MCAS will just be a blip on their screen when this is all done.
There's this book called Blue Ocean Strategy. And this is essentially what businesses do when they're looking at targets for objectives that are beyond where they've determined their subsistence is going to be. So if you can map out the projects that you got going with kids, you can say, well, this is where we'll fill in the expectations for the grade level or for what they want to accomplish in high school. And then beyond that, the projects beyond that, like sending a rocket into space, I think that's beyond that. That's where your blue ocean is. That's where your creative thinking goes, and you're beyond the grade level. And you eventually, you move the whole school into those objectives over a long period of time, 5, 6, 7 years. So that would be a good strategy to think about.
Okay. Before we're done, Sam, could you go back to slide 3 for a second? So I tend to come back to this point often, but it's National School Psychology Week, so I hope you all will indulge me just a little bit. But looking down at the panorama data, if we do the same sort of deep dive on student growth potential, our base isn't stable. We're not improving the social emotional health of our students. is what those numbers show me there. So I think any academic advancements that we're making, any progress on the MCAS speaks to the strength of our students, community, and teachers. And I love that we did this deep dive on MCAS. And again, I would state I'd love to see sort of a deep dive on where our kids are struggling and what we're doing to support them. Because again, if that base isn't stable, what isn't they say, Maslow before Bloom? If we don't have a stable base to build from, we're not going to see the academic growth potential that we want to. So I just wanted to point that out too.
So, since we dove into it, can you walk me through this? I have no idea what this data
Well,
is.
I'm just looking at the right-hand column there, Eric, where it's talking about, what students are reporting compared to 2020 data. And students' reports of experiencing challenging feelings where our scores are lower. Emotional regulation scores are lower.
Got it. So this is
okay.
And
So
this-
that's how I'm reading it.
This is
That's
not this year's data, just so that you know. This is a screenshot from, because we're still in a process where the window is open and I couldn't get a screenshot of the accurate data. So this was more as like a visual to show, folks some of what you're doing.
That's a big difference right there, what you said, because I took it exactly the same way she did.
Yeah.
That this is current data and that we're down.
It's not current data.
But
No.
again, looking at
But
national
just the
trends,
same, what you're saying, I
probably
think
gonna
is
see
a
that.
good, I think that's good to raise, and we should be looking at this. In fact, that's why we measure this annually.
And it is in our schedule to come after that data and come and do that, deep dive and to present that data. We wanted to start with this. We have the iReady and we have panorama data like we have in the past too.
And, but intentionally, when I saw this too, Carrie, I like that self-efficacy piece, that, that stands out in this. And that is a part of what I do feel like we're being thoughtful about here and working on is trying to encourage kids and, make sure that they believe they can, right? That's a big part of this. And and a lot of our experience has disrupted that. So you're absolutely right.
Sam, go ahead.
I'll say, is this data based on surveys that the kids do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So on slide 20 with the, it's called the equity and the achievement gap. That's also being measured with respect to the pandemic, where we saw such huge gaps develop in different groups of kids.
Correct.
That's right.
So we're actually doing really well there.
Well, that's why I threw it on here, because I thought it was part of our story that was worth telling, even though I will caveat it with it's not, there's lots to look at here. So there's evidence that it's stable and we'll keep our eye on it. But I think that evidence is worth calling out.
Good.
Great. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks.
Sure thing.
Good stuff.
There's one more question I have here too. Cheryl, for 2022 in what looks like ELA, and math as well. So the problem that we've got generally is that the percentage of students that are either meeting expectations or exceeding is lower than we've seen back in years prior to the pandemic. I know we can't really call that out statistically, but the fact is that we're taking an achievement test that we had present in 2017, and now we don't have as many students meeting expectations as we did.
So that is true, except for I would reframe what you just said.
Okay.
I don't think the problem is that, because that's our experience, and it's everyone's experience that the proficiency rates are dropping, which is why you see the state trend and our trend kind of mirroring it. Is it a problem? Of course we want to get kids back to, in our context, back to proficiency, but I don't think it's the problem in the sense that this is what we're experiencing altogether. So we want to make sure that we start to see that line go up, and we would love to see that line go up at a better angle even than the state.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Michelle. Sure. All right, I think we're on to new business. And we've got the Nipmuc co-principals, Mrs. Moran and Mr. Clements. Come on up.
Thank you. Dr. Cohen, what would you like us?
Wherever you want. Do you want to sit here and we'll go around?
No, wherever. I'll pull a chair. You're fine.
Here, take this. No.
This guy's my one.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the chance to come and talk a little bit about our school improvement plan. It's good to be here tonight, and there's a lot of interesting stuff shared this evening. We're glad to be a part of it. We always appreciate the chance to come and share our school improvement plan, and I think over the last decade or so, you've probably gotten used to seeing a really clear through line from one plan to the next. I think this year in particular, you're going to see the through line, and this will feel like part 2 of our goals from last year. So I know you've had a chance to read the goals. I think we'll spend a little bit of our time just building context around the action steps so you have a better sense of where we're at. And I think I'll go back to Carrie's point a moment ago about Maslow before Bloom's. I think that's where we were last year, where we were coming in and talking about having a year and a half of learning disrupted and how to provide the students with the support they needed in order to be successful. We organized our school goals around 3 key verbs that you heard Dr. Cohen reference earlier, of understand, support, and engage. And as a school community, we were really intentional about going about that in a linear fashion. We really spent a lot of time up front getting to know our kids. The physical and the social distance and the health restrictions that were in place made it so that we needed to do some different kind of work to understand who they were, the struggles they were having, the strengths they have, the potential they bring to the classroom. And so we looked a lot at data tools and different protocols we could put in place to get to know the learners. Then we shifted to support and expanded our understanding of support to include the social emotional supports that our kids needed in addition to the learning. And we spent the majority of our year in understand and support as a school, taking on some really intentional action steps and intentionally left engaged to the end. We put Maslow before Bloom. We felt we needed to. And I would agree with Carrie that this continues to be a need for us to meet the wellness and the health needs of our kids. So that remains a top priority, and we're excited about some of the steps we have in place this year that are going to continue that work. Coming into this year, we kept understand, support, and engage. It's such a good umbrella for the work that we're doing every single day, but you'll notice as we talk about the goals that it's not as linear, meaning we're having action steps in each of those 3 verb categories throughout the course of the entire year. And you'll notice just visually when you look at our action steps, many more of the action steps are around the engage area. Although there's a steady drumbeat of work taking place in understand and support. So we'll go through those areas very quickly, take some questions, and hopefully build some context for the school goals we have. Mrs. Marino, kick it off by talking about understand.
Sure. So understand, you see, if you have the full document, there are really only 3 action steps. What I would say about these 3 action steps is they're action steps that are ongoing for the entire year, essentially. There's a lot embedded with them. In them, we're excited to be a part of what is being referred to as the S3 Academy. The middle school is also a part of that, elementary as well, or just all of the schools. So we have a strong team of 7 educators that's made up of our school counseling team, regular educators, special educators, John and myself, that are excited to start this work with the Rennie Center and DC to really kind of look at how do we meet the needs of learners here, and to really have an outside perspective that's research-based to say, what are you doing with data? What does it look like? How can we get better at meeting the need? So that's a neat part of kind of our own professional development. It comes with 5 sessions that we're kind of learning together, but then 5 individual coaching sessions with a coach that we will have to kind of help us as we think about our student intervention process, the data that we have access to in Power School. There's a lot of great pieces set up, but we know we need to get better at what we're doing because there is a lot of data to process and a lot of kids' needs to meet. And some of that is needs, some of that is building on their strengths, right? And some of that is enhancing the learning too for those kids that are ready to move on and figuring out how we can do that. Second action step is the data inquiry process, really digging in. John mentioned
Last year, we had the opportunity to, as a school, look at Thrively and Panorama. Those were our two data sources, and really trying to come up with a strength-based approach, but also understanding the needs of the learners in front of us. So all of our students, once again, just took the Panorama survey recently, so we're excited to get that data back, but kind of engaging in this continuous inquiry process. Working with departments, they're going to, during common planning time, dig into the data, find parts that they're curious about, the things that Cheryl talked about, implementing action steps to impact the data, going to take another snapshot of data, right, without feeling we need to implement another Panorama survey or an MCAS test or whatever it looked like, and to see if those action steps are making an impact. So that's continuous work that will happen in departments, but also in faculty meetings throughout the course of the year. And then the other one is student feedback about equity, diversity, inclusion. High on our radar, we have a student feedback forum here called Food for Thought Lunches, which is a process in which teachers and John and I, sometimes Maureen pops in, have the opportunity to talk directly to kids and get their feedback, and they've been powerful. They provided us with data in those Food for Thought lunches sometimes that make direct actions to what happens here. And while we do have some data, survey data around EDI from last year that we have dug into and taken a look at, we feel like that verbal feedback from kids, getting it on paper, collecting the responses kind of helps move our school forward in a really meaningful way where students feel that their voices are heard and actions can be taken really quickly. So we're excited about that. Again, that's ongoing over the course of the year.
Shifting over to the support verb and everything that's in that bucket, probably our most bite-sized, but an important one that I think captures the theme of some of the work was the first days of school redesign, where as a faculty and with students together in this room, we had a lead learner workshop in the spring talking about welcoming students to school, building relationships, establishing the norms. The norms of the school were disrupted so much that we felt like we needed to be really intentional in how we welcome students and connected them to the school. So, for example, over the first couple of days of school, all of the classes met only one time rather than having a regular rotation. Each school day began with hour-long sessions in the advisory, where a small group advisory, where kids were immediately connecting with their advisor. There was also school-wide cookouts. There was a presentation from upperclassmen to freshmen about what NIPMUC's all about. There were intentional activities focused on welcoming and sort of orientation to the school. I heard from a teacher the other day who said that they got an email from a freshman parent with a question about a course and looking at making course changes. And it was for a student in their advisory program. And for the first time, we had a parent sort of cross the line of thinking of our advisor. And I think the role that we are hopeful that they will have is really being that 4-year guide on the side that walks closely. They almost interpret it in the role of the school counselor, because in the first 4 days of school, that freshman met 3 times with that adult and immediately was connected to an adult in the school that can be a go-to person to answer questions and provide support. So that redesign, again, bite-sized action step, but an important one. We noticed the role of technology in our kids' lives changing quite a bit over the course of the pandemic. So not only Zoom and doing digital learning, but just access to technology and having that as the primary connection to peers and the reliance on the phone. And so we talked a lot about technology with the support of Dave Quinn and department chairs. We're looking at, we'll be implementing this year Common Sense Media's digital citizenship lesson plans. I don't want to call it curriculum because it really is more content lesson plans, but it provides great guidance for teachers in a range of topics. It'll be integrated grades 9 through 12. A foundation will take place in our advisory program, but we're looking to embed this also in the curriculum because technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives. So we don't see it as a pull-out topic, but really something that can be taught through the lens of curriculum areas. So actually, I think each department tomorrow is going to be taking, on Thursday this week, we'll be taking a dive and looking at the lessons and where they can fit, what's the best matchup for their curriculum areas. Inclusive and equitable classrooms, really fortunate. We wrote a grant last year to support professional development around this area. The anti-bias toolkit, which will be coming in from the ADL, providing training to a cohort of 20 teachers. It's a great resource. They offer phenomenal training and it's really actionable, action-minded, which is great. It's intended, we were able to achieve it through Mass Insight Education, so it was around our AP program, but it's for any teacher that either teaches AP or recommends to AP courses, which school of our size, just about anybody, which is great. So that'll be some high quality common language and training that we'll be building amongst the staff. We have co-teaching professional development going on for our teams. You know, we've had this in place and took a big leap forward at the beginning of our last strategic plan with co-teaching, and a lot of fantastic work has been done. Now it's a great time to recenter, get our new folks who are on board, who weren't part of that training initially, trained in strengthening our co-teaching strategies, teams, and relationships. And also, we're thrilled with the work of the DCAP committee last year that put together an updated district curriculum accommodation plan, which is an action-filled, strategy-filled document. It has a variety of tier 1 strategies that any teacher can use at any point whenever they're looking at the data, as Mary Ann talked about, understanding our kids and how to support them, understanding what the obstacle is, and then applying the strategies from the DCAP. We've had a DCAP, obviously, but our emphasis now is using it as a meaningful tool in the context of our data analysis process to help our kids remove the obstacles that they have in order to meet the same high standard, high goals, rigorous goals for all.
Awesome. So moving on to engage, here you go, not to overwhelm. This is definitely the area that we're most excited about, and we understand that it takes us support and then understand and support to get to the engage, but also want to continue kind of moving forward the efforts that we've made, because we know that if we're providing our students meaningful learning experiences in the classroom, that the support piece, the understand piece also become easier as we engage them in those learning experiences. So the first thing on the list is the innovation pathway. You heard a little bit about it last year from Dave Quinn, who's spoken about it. But really we got a planning grant for innovation pathway in computer science. So now we just submitted the innovation pathway grant. So really looking towards a 4-year or course sequence. It's supported by the state that ultimately connects our school with industry professionals and gets our students out on meaningful internships and or has them engage in capstone projects in the final years of that. So whether they're headed off straight to the workforce or headed off to a 4-year degree program, it's intended for all. That's a huge part of it, is open access and making sure that there are pathways that lead there. I know the middle school is doing some really exciting work too, around technology, around computer science. So we're excited kind of about the building of that. So we just, the team finished up with the grant, but is also working on some Project Lead the Way training that's happening right now as well.
We're really fortunate that and thankful that the budget supported the addition of a library media specialist and digital technology specialist. We've added that role after spending about 2 months last year with a group of students and teachers who are part of the Media Center Redesign Committee. So we tried to hit the ground running for the person who was taking the role and provide enough guidance about vision, connection to our beliefs about learning and our definition of learning, and action steps we could take over the summer in order to update the space in order to help the person taking over the role to maximize the resources we have. Been to the Library Media Center, you see that we made a number of adjustments based on student feedback, which were great, from updating the catalog, changing the space, adding some comfortable seating. And Amy Townsley is on board, who's our Media Center and Digital Technology Specialist. Amy has a very Nipmuc mindset in that we're excited about the ideas she brings, the community building she's establishing around the Media Center. We haven't had this important resource person to help support curriculum instruction and assessment, get the right resources, be a planning partner. And you know, at Nipmuc, we're also so focused on authenticity and community partners, and we're excited to see where her role grows over time. For us this year, it's around getting faculty reacclimated to looking for this kind of support. They've been doing an awesome job of being creative on their own in finding solutions and finding the resources they need. We now have that critical planning partner who's going to work directly with kids and teachers to give them the support they need to take the curriculum to the next level in many cases. So we're excited about that.
Showcases of learning, you heard both Maureen and Cheryl talk a little bit about it earlier. It's kind of been an exciting growing trend at Nipmuc over the course of the last, I would say, 5 years. Started with the science symposium with a single teacher and then expanded in the science department to multiple teachers. But in recent years, we now have
a civics symposium. I know DECA is interested in doing a showcase of learning. Our computer science students have done a showcase of learning. Our legacy students have done a showcase of learning. So they're really finding showcases of learning to be a meaningful way to engage with what we keep talking about in terms of authenticity. So whether that's the authentic audience that they have to present their learning to, whether they're working on an authentic problem, like our engineering students that are engaged with that and then sharing it, whether they're working with authentic clients. In the case of DECA, many times they're working with an authentic client. It taps into all of those pieces. So recently we had a lead learner workshop where we kind of all came together and said, this is one of the ways that we really want to highlight student learning. What does it look like? What are best practices around it? And how can we make the most of that opportunity so that it feels like a streamlined effort? We can start to collect information and data, either anecdotally or formally, in terms of the impact on learning. We know that we're getting higher quality products from students when the authenticity piece is threaded through that. So we're excited to continue our work. Showcases often happen in the spring towards the end of the year, but we have some half-year courses too that are interested in doing some kind of midpoint as well.
We didn't plan to go back and forth, but it looks like we're doing that, so we'll just keep going with it. Next is Freshman Seminar. Freshman Seminar is a reimagination of our 21st Century Skills course, half-year course that all freshmen take while they're at Nipmuc. We shifted some of the teaching assignments around and had a team of teachers come to us, Lauren Blackburn, Kate Reardon, and Leanne McClavick, and say, what if? And we love that what if mindset, people coming forward with a new idea and a way to do things differently. They proposed, designed, and are in the process of carrying out for the first semester a course that is for freshmen that walks them through the portrait of the learner, that introduces them to the 6 competency areas, the skills that are embedded in it. It will culminate with every freshman creating a portrait of the learner scholar's profile that tells their story. And as you'll hear me talk about in a little bit, connects to the idea of personal narrative, which we believe is an answer to the question that Sean asked earlier, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. We are so excited about the work that they are doing. It's so intentional, it's so thoughtful, and I think coming into year 5 of our strategic plan, where we had this idea of a portrait of a learner, and now we've progressed to inspired learning days and portrait of learner scholars and the integration of it from class to class and lesson to lesson. And now we're going to have every student walking through the doors of the school getting an in-depth overview of this and what it means for them and how it connects meaningfully to their lives and the curriculum. We're super excited about it, and that team of teachers deserves a huge shout out.
Awesome. I'm going to actually link 2 together. We're going to save a little time here. I'm going to link career shadowing for all 10th graders on a pilot internship program. Again, talking about authenticity, we know how critically important it is for our students to get out into the workplace, to explore their interests and decide on career pathways, I would say, because I don't think we're expecting any student to know exactly what they want to do, but really have an idea of the opportunities that exist beyond Nipmuc as they start to make those decisions about their future. Pre-pandemic, we had just gotten to the point where all of our 10th graders, as part of 21st Century Skills, when it was a 10th grade course, took a day from school and were engaged in a full day career shadow. It happened on 2 different days, so half of our 10th graders went, the other half went on the other day. And then pandemic came, so that was put on hold because obviously we couldn't send all of our students out. Our school counselors are pretty passionate, and they're working with Leanne McClavick, our Career Community Innovations Coordinator, to get all 10th graders out again this year. I think the magic day is May 5th, I want to say. And part of the school counseling curriculum, there's career lessons that go along with that, and interest surveys, and helping kids understand kind of their interests, how those relate to potential professions in the future, to help guide the selection of those career shadow opportunities. So that's part of it, right? Getting our students out initially. Obviously, one day in the workplace is not enough for them to decide what their futures are going to look like. So we're also excited about a pilot internship program that Leanne McClavick is working on as we speak, visiting other schools, hearing Sutton has a strong internship program, Methuen has another one. So hearing about the different models, Oxford has a model, and figuring out how we can pilot something here by the end of the year. It would most likely be seniors in their final weeks of school after AP tests or other essential assignments, projects, etc. are done, but we're looking at models too that potentially place students during vacation weeks, over the summer after vacation. So really being flexible in our model to ensure that the most students at some point have the opportunity to engage in an internship program.
Great. Last year, we were here talking about getting a pilot off the ground for the Mastery Transcript Consortium and the development of Mastery Transcript. Just to give you a quick refresher on that, Mastery Transcript Consortium is a group of about 400 schools across the globe that are interested in moving beyond the limitations of an achievement-based, grade-based transcript. If you look at a sheet of paper, a transcript, it has every course you took and what grade you got. It doesn't tell you a whole lot about your passions, interests, curiosities, and potential. This group, primarily made up of independent schools, decided they wanted to come up with a digital, clickable, gradeless transcript that would replace the old school version of a transcript that would help to tell a new story about their students. In the past 8 years, they've gone from idea to practice, where now there are more than 300 schools that have accepted students using the Mastery Transcript. We looked for a pilot of no more than 10 last year that we kicked off in the spring, worked with them throughout the summer, and this year, a group of seniors, we've been working with them to develop their Mastery Transcript here at Nipmuc. We knew having 10 students, not everyone would opt into it, and we were absolutely okay with that. We're not going to gamble with their futures. There's nothing that we would want to do less than that. We want to make sure we're providing them support. At the same time, we knew we would gather great information about this tool and how viable it was for us. Mastery Transcript Consortium along the way came out with a new product that they launched in September called the Mastery Learning Record. So it looks identical to the Mastery Transcript. However, it's not the transcript. It is a companion to the transcript that can be sent with a traditional school application and transcript. For us, that was like the skies opening up above. Because it feels like there's a risk in going to a gradeless transcript that 400 schools in the globe are using, right? And so we don't want to be risky. We want to be sure we're doing right by our kiddos. The Mastery Learning Record can be sent as a companion. It's, again, same product, digital applicable, goes with the link. Past week, we were able to launch our first Mastery Learning Records with some of our cohort, and we're excited to get them in front of you at some time soon. We are so proud of this group of students who have been working so hard and essentially creating a digital portfolio of their experiences. What's different, and I love the showcases, I'm passionate about it. I love the art show, I'm passionate about it. What's different about the other things that we have at Nipmuc and the Mastery Transcript and Learning Record is that it is a school document. And so just like Cheryl was up presenting data that is black and white in uniform, the Mastery Transcript is an official record from the school. It allows us a weight of validity that you don't have from sort of the colloquial experiences that a kid has. When you have a conversation, Fallon, I'm sure, can tell you about some of the most empowering, important learning experiences in her life. But what was different is if Fallon had a Mastery Learning Record, it's all captured on a document. So, as a district 5 years ago, when we took on the goal, one of our vision actions is we will move beyond the limitations of traditional achievement in order to come up with new metrics of success that identify students' skills, talents, growth, and achievements. This is it. This is the first time we've been able to look at something as a tangible answer to that. And we're looking at the potential of having a new qualitative piece of data that complements, doesn't replace, but complements what you just saw and complements what we were talking about with the social emotional health of our students, where our kids can know the story they tell themselves about themselves. That's very meta. But we all have that, right? You have a story you tell yourself about yourself. And that story is maybe the most important thing we carry along. This year, our goal with the Mastery Transcript is to talk about it. We're going to start with our faculty. We're going to be making visits to our common planning time sessions to talk with every teacher, share the work that our kids have done, have focus group with the students who have participated, capture data from them, look at the experience, the potential, and then hopefully chart a course together to the future that answers that question of what is that other data piece? Not just a conversation, but something that you can look at, hold up, and say, this is an example of a qualitative piece of data for our kiddos. We think it's a game changer. We're super excited to talk about it with the teachers, with the kids, with all of you in our community, to see what place it has in the future of Nipmuc. I wish we could have ended with that one.
I know. I mean, I think they know the other two. The other two up there, authentic learning experiences. We've talked a lot about our work with faculty and staff, and the whole community continues. We have an amazing group of community partners that are always willing to jump in. I can't sing the praises of our teachers enough, who we are regularly getting guest speaker forms, or I want to have this professional in, or can we go out to this workplace? I want to build this connection for our students. So they're doing an amazing job building those connections
as well. So our work continues there. It will forever be a work in progress. And Inspired Learning Days, we're just always excited about. They're district-wide again. We'll have 2 of them. And it's really about bringing those authentic learning experiences to kids and letting them explore their interests and their passions and the things that maybe they don't get in a traditional day. But I do have to say too, like so much of that has started as an Inspired Learning Day has made its way back into our day, which is ultimately what we want, whether it's a trip to the lab or cooking lessons, an Italian class, those are making their way into our classrooms, and that's really exciting too. So lots of good things happening.
Yes.
So back in the support section.
Yeah.
So I was really curious as to what you're doing for reviewing and updating the process by which teachers consult with their colleagues on the application of the district curriculum. I really love that because that kind of learning from your peers is fantastic. So what kind of changes are you envisioning?
Yeah, I mean, it's an extension of what Marianne was talking about. Last year, a lot of our work was around data literacy and new data, looking at Panorama, looking at Thrively, understanding the strengths of our kids, their talents, their needs. And we dipped a toe in those waters. The job now is going to be to embed it in routines. Through our partnership with S3, we're going to take the ideas that we have, run them through a process to come up with a new formal, consistent data protocol that can take place within departments in order to understand our kiddos and then figure out what strategies we can apply. We see the DCAP as a tool that fits into that process. Over the course of the next couple of months, where our departments in their common planning time are going to be taking a look at data and beginning every session with a data share out. Obviously anonymously about the kids, but talking about what they looked at, what they learned. So it's building it into the weekly routine of checking the data pieces. That's then going to transition to dipping into the DCAP and doing the same kind of sharing out with the data, a spreadsheet built so that across departments you can see how is the math department accessing data, how's the social studies, et cetera, and then what kind of DCAP strategies are they using. It's still, that's new for us. I know when Maureen talked about the vision for the DCAP, it's a new practice for us. The idea of actually having the physical dog-eared, beat-up old copy that you walk into a planning meeting with, you open up the page and you're digging in and finding those resources and strategies. That's a different mindset from where we've been at. Collaboratively, we've been problem solving, and I think the DCAP for our teachers feels like something they do already, but it's formalizing it and building it in as a response to a data review as opposed to in the moment.
Yeah. Well, and also, how did you utilize that data as part of the discussion?
Right.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Should never put us last, sorry.
We were good till we got to the engaged slide.
No, I appreciate you guys going through this.
Thank
It's really
you.
good stuff. I'll make one comment here real quick. It's not really a question, but the whole advisory program thing, I gotta be honest, I'd never heard of it before, and the feedback on it, and then kind of talking, it's awesome. It's kind of, I don't know the best way to say it, almost a hidden gem, right? I feel like I'm quasi-aware of what's going on at school and didn't know until the student made it to the high school. It's really great. So just pass it on.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. All right. So moving on to school committee subcommittees. First up is policy committee.
We've not met, so our next meeting is scheduled for November 28th.
Excellent. All right.
That's the update.
Cool. I'm on the page now. All right. Budget committee or budget subcommittee.
That's you, isn't it?
That's me. Yeah. I guess we haven't met since the last school committee, and we're just working through the November, December dates that we'll finalize here shortly. And then the school goals workshop. Sean, you want to make a couple comments?
Oh, God. Okay, so just to put the context here, we had a meeting with a representative from MASC, and Maureen Cohen's suggestion, which is very helpful, to build a set of goals and objectives for the school committee itself. We haven't really done that in the past, so it's a brand new exercise for us. And it was very helpful trying to focus in on some of the things that we could do as a school committee. And I think the top three that we came up with were take an active participation in communication, get a little bit more structured about our budget process, and number 3 was
the capital
plan.
capital investment plan,
and
which we knew we needed to do, but that we might as well formalize it anyway.
Absolutely.
And just get it on the goals.
Yeah.
So we have those focused as our goals, and we've got a couple of the committee members taking off to come back with initial proposals on those 2 goals, and we'll work them out from there.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for the update. All right. Are there any other matters not anticipated by the committee within the last 48 hours? All right. Any correspondence? All right. So we've got a couple future agenda items. Student support service update will be on November 21st, along with the elementary school plans, improvement plans for November 21st. All right. If there's nothing else, I guess we could take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. We'll see if Phil's out there, but let's start with a roll call vote.
Matt Hagan, aye.
Vicki Ludwigson, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Eric Brown, aye.
Sean Nicholson,
All right. Well, we'll take that as a majority, and we are adjourned at 9:02.